Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back for some of you to the Data Science Experience Day. My name is Nathan de Groot. I'm the moderator of the presentation sessions here in the beautiful chapel, where I'm all by myself with a sidekick and some technicians, but with also a lot of viewers at home and in different places. We have two presentation sessions coming up for you. Roby de Jong from Rabobank will give a presentation first, and Joost Meijer from Itility. They will give a presentation of 25 minutes, and during and after the presentation you can use the comment section in YouTube to post a remark or a question, and a selection of those will be presented to the presenters. All right, we will go ahead with a quick check-in question. Roby, is your sound working properly?
Yeah, it's working properly, I guess.
Perfect. And well, we would have wished to be together here in the chapel with Joost and with you. But where are you now, actually?
I'm now at my home in Amsterdam, and it was quite a challenge because I had to redecorate my whole living room. But I managed to create a white background and some natural light.
All right, all right. It seems like you succeeded. And Joost, where are you located at the moment?
I'm at Itility headquarters and trying to keep safe also with some technical devices so that we can keep our distance. So yeah.
All right.
Keeping safe, but at the office.
Yeah. Cool. And Joost, does that also give you data of who is succeeding in this, or is that one bridge too far?
No, this is actually it keeps us safe, but it doesn't steal our data.
Okay, that's what they all say. Anyway,
that's true.
Anyway, we will continue with two presentations, and let's have one look at the sidekick. Can you see how many people are tuned in at the moment? 40,000? No, there's no idea. No, but how many? 72 at the moment, so that's a good start, I would say. Imagine those 72, Roby, here right in front of you. Please share your screen and the digital floor is yours.
Thank you, Nathan. So welcome everyone, thank you for dialing in. I'm Roby de Jong, and I have a broad range of interests, which started when I was a little kid. And one of them is doing good, because bringing a smile on people's faces is priceless, as I guess many of you would agree with me. I'm raised in a family that started an NGO when I was a little kid, and that was called Cosmo Queen. That NGO enables people to develop their own skill in the textile industry, in order to make them and give them an opportunity to become socially and economically independent. Today, I'm the vice president of that NGO, and it makes me proud to see so many strong and happy people eager to develop themselves. But on the other hand, I love all the opportunities that are in the data science field. And I've had the privilege to work with lots of companies and people to become more data-driven. When Rabobank asked me to join their Data for Food program, I had no idea that data science and doing good, two of my passions, could be combined in one program. On the other hand, when you're such a big company, you have the network, so you have the connectors role, you have the knowledge to make a difference, and you have the funding to make a big impact. And that was one of the reasons why I decided to join Rabobank 1.5 years ago. And when I joined the Data for Food program, I learned that if you go back approximately 130 years, that Rabobank was one of the few financial institutions that financed farmers. Over the years, Rabobank evolved into a world finance bank focusing mainly on food and agri. And this is also when we discovered that 181 million farmers worldwide experience a lending gap, so no access to finance under suitable conditions, of $79 billion. And that is not acceptable, because smallholder farmers play an essential role in the economic life of most developing countries. They have 2 to 50 acres. They grow 50% of their produced commodities, so for example lettuce or potatoes, to off-takers, that those are buyers of those commodities. And with that, they earn a salary of 50 to 150 million, 150 US dollars per month. And unfortunately, that is often not enough money to grow their produce. So additional money is needed. If we dive further into this problem, I discovered that there are 3 reasons why this lending gap exists. So there are value chain actors, so that are companies directly involved in the value chain of smallholder farmers. So that could be seed companies, that could be wholesale companies, resale companies, processing companies. Those companies are willing to pre-finance smallholder farmers, but have difficulty with assessing the risk around funding these smallholder farmers, and therefore they're hesitant to lend. Also, the resources that these companies have available for funding are restricted, and I will talk more about this problem later on. In addition, there are companies that have the resources available and that have no restrictions in any way to finance farmers, and they do so, but under very unsuitable conditions. So that could be that they charge a very unrealistic interest rate or set a very unrealistic payback time, for example. And this brings the farmer in even more problems in the long run. And given that smallholder farmers accessing finance is very important to fight poverty and to reduce and increase as well, and increase local and global food security. We could give them a fish to feed for one day, or we can teach them how to fish and could feed them for a lifetime. And that is what we're aiming for, and that is why it's very important to identify and reduce the risk around lending to smallholder farmers. That is one of the reasons why we started the project Credit Connect within the Data for Food program. Credit Connect aims to determine the creditworthiness of smallholder farmers in order to inform value chain actors of the risks involved, which actually means, can we help value chain actors to determine if they get their money back or not? And to determine the creditworthiness proved to be more difficult than we initially expected. Because Rabobank has billions of financial transactions, but not on our target group, the smallholder farmers. If we approach a problem like this, we break it up 3 ways: data, modeling, and usage. And since we don't have the relevant data within the Rabobank, we had to talk to internal experts on food and agri to get a better understanding what factors impact farmers and the commodities they are producing. That is why we decided to identify 11 data types that says something about a farmer's willingness and ability to pay back its loan. Often within companies or on social channels, people talk about satellite data. So just use satellite data in your solutions. But these kind of buzzwords are not helping you to make a precise estimate what factors have a predictable impact on smaller farmers, for example, behavior or on his business. So for that reason, we decided to break these 11 data types down into elements and sub-elements to give ourselves a deeper understanding about what factors have an impact on a farmer's productivity, profitability, and its behavior. So if we look at environmental data, it consists of 5 data types. It says something about diseases, about pests, vegetation index, biomass index, and climate and weather data. And let's apply these 11 data types, or these data types in particular, maybe on a farmer that grows the most popular crop in the world. And that's the coffee plant. And as many of you probably don't know, is that the Arabica coffee bean is an especially sensitive species of coffee beans. So if we look at let's say, temperature. The temperature of a coffee plant should be between 18 and 21 degrees Celsius. Too high or too low, and the berries won't grow correctly, and no beans will be produced. Also, the coffee plant needs a specific amount of water and a 3-month dry season to flower. If we look at the data type geographical, for example, then altitude is also a very important data element. The coffee plant should grow on a certain elevation, not too high, not too low. And if we look at farm and field data, for example, that says amongst other things something about the soil quality, which is very important for a crop to grow, crop protection or the crops planted and their crop cycles. And when can we expect a farmer to harvest and earn money? If we know that the coffee plant is growing for 1 year now, we know that the coming 2 to 3 years, no berries will be produced. So the farmer will not earn a salary, and actually then we will get a very low creditworthiness score if that's the only crop he is producing. If we look at market data, that says something about the demand and the prices being paid at a specific moment in time. And with these data elements, we can also determine and actually estimate what the profit of the farmer is going to be. And that is when the farmer KYC data becomes important. Because if you look at household composition, the number of children of the farmer, if we know that, and if they have it, then it's highly significant that school fees need to be paid. But you should be very careful with what data to collect, because in parts of India, it means bad luck to count the number of children. And along the way, you will discover many more cultural and industry-bound restrictions. So not only having the data is important, it is also very important to know the expertise you have regarding that data. Otherwise, the wrong conclusions can be made and relevant data will not be recognized as such. Because these 11 data types can be gathered on multiple levels of details. For a model to be scalable across countries and types of farmers, data should be widely available. And if you go more to the left side of the range, for a model to be predictable on individual level, the model improves with more detailed data. So scalability on the right side versus predictability on the left side is a trade-off needed for each data type. And based on our understanding of the situation, we decided that the optimal point of our model should combine highly predictive farmer factors with widely available region factors. That's how we determined that we have to collect the data circled in orange. So we have to determine what our data collection strategy is going to be. So what are data providers that are maybe easy to reach? And what data do they possess? And are we allowed to use that data? And a data collection strategy, or actually the data collection period, is a very time-consuming phase. Because data providers often promise the world, but can only deliver a small piece of it. So how do you discover the credibility of the sales pitch of a data provider in an early stage? The first step is to identify what potential data providers could be. If you have identified them, you do online research and collect as much information as possible about these data providers. And if they're interested, the next step is to invite them for a first interview. During that first interview, a predefined interview template is used and which questions need to be answered. And that is very important because that information will be used to determine if the selection criteria are met. For example, selection criteria are that the database should contain at least 5,000 farmers and should have for each farmer 2 crop cycles. When we have this data, this information available, and we know if they are selected, we invite them to send a data dump to us, because often the data does not live up to its standards. This gives us the opportunity to identify and check the data quality. If the data quality is determined, we discuss the results with the data provider in a second interview. And then we discuss the potential collaboration with this data provider. Next step to approach a problem like this is modeling. Determine the target, determine the payback time, identify factors that influence farmers the most. When you're in university, a data set is provided with a target column, which says yes or no, correct or incorrect, 0 or 1. But in reality, this does not exist because you're trying to predict something. So the most important step is to determine the target. What is the definition of a good or a bad farmer? Is a farmer a good farmer when he pays back his credit, but not necessarily his interest rate? So his credit will be reaching 0, his interest rate will be above 0. Will a good farmer be a farmer that pays back his credit and his interest rate, but exceeds the payback time? We decided to determine that a good farmer will be someone who pays back its credit, but not necessarily its interest rate on time. Now we talked about the farmer. Let's talk about the commodity further, because commodities have multiple crop cycles, and a crop cycle is an annual cycle of activity related to the growth and the harvest of a crop. So that could be loosening the soil, seeding, watering the plant, moving the plant when it grows bigger, and harvesting. So lettuce grows fairly quickly, 6 to 8 weeks. Potatoes take on average 3 months, depending on the variety that you're growing. Coffee is a very labor-intensive plant, and the berries are hand-picked through multiple phases throughout the harvest season, which lasts 4 to 6 months. So if you would like to determine the payback time, do you set a fixed date, or do you determine the payback time based on the farmer you're doing business with and the crops he is producing with the accommodating crop cycles? We decided that if you would like to make a very individual model or predictable model on individual level, you develop a model based on the commodities. If you would like to develop a model for all commodities, then you set your payback time on 9 months. Because in 9 months, most of the commodities will grow, be harvested, and sold. So we decided to build a more predictive model on individual level, and therefore the model is developed per commodity. So when the target is chosen and the model is trained with the help of experts, these experts should remain closely involved. In part because for most of these data types, not a lot of historical data is available. So the output of your model should be validated extensively with those experts. On the other hand, you have your test set. And with this test set, you test the outcome of your model. But we learned that doing that based on your test set or just distinguish it between, for example, commodities, that it's not enough. Because apparently, for loan performance varies between the markets the farmer does business with. So you need to take that into account as well. Because we learned that we were working with the country Kenya, because there we were confronted with anomalies. Their markets are outperforming each other, are behaving differently, or have a personal agreement with the farmer. So that's why we had anomalies in the data. And we don't know if that also is happening with in other countries as well. It could also be that when the market doesn't pay back a farmer on time, consequently, a farmer cannot pay back his loan on time, becoming a bad paying farmer all of a sudden, without having any influence on it. For this reason, it is very important to decide how your model will be validated and based on which criteria in an early stage. But the project doesn't finish with the model. As a well-known saying of George Bass says, all models are wrong, but some are useful. How could the output of your model be a starting point of an action? And that is a question I particularly love as a designer, Amy, because the first step is to learn as much as possible about your end user to get a better understanding how they use a credit risk assessment as a service. And we learned that value chain actors would like to log into a dashboard and would like you to show the first version. So imagine that Karagita requested a loan and you need to determine if it will be issued. We've learned that the most important step to start with is to find out what the unique identifier is that value chain actors are using for farmers. Because when you would like to request a score, you need to log in. You log into your personal dashboard. You request a new credit score, and then unique identifier is required. In our case, it is the mobile phone number, because that unique identifier is needed to retrieve the data of Rakita and to calculate the score. The next learning will be that you need to determine the range. What will the range be of your credit score? And how many buckets will I create? We decided that we will use the well-known and widely adopted FICO scale within credit modeling and within banks. Now, we decided to use that for our initial dashboard, and we will learn along the way if we need to adjust that. And the FICO score will be used to display a farmer's credit score. But what do you do if a value chain actor would like to know where a score is based on? Then the model should be calculated in a different way. The model should be calculated individually on the elements that you would like to display under score based 1, that are in this case those 5 elements. So the model will be first calculated on those 5 elements, and those scores together will be combined to create generic credit score. And normally that is not something a data scientist looks at, but it is very important to look at your end-to-end solution to determine to prevent a lot of rework and frustration. I talked about 3 factors that we need to tackle for a problem like value chain actors not able to determine the creditworthiness of small farmers. So we talked about data, we talked about modeling, and we talked about usage. We need to ask ourselves the question, how do I find the right data? How do I try, what do I try to achieve in a matrix? And how do I make the model outcome useful and a starting point of an action? But you don't tackle a problem like this on your own. An ecosystem should be established because you are dependent on data providers that help you with the data. You're dependent on experts that help you to understand what you're trying to predict. And you're dependent on value chain actors who help you with the funding. But they don't have the capability or the expertise in-house to build a credit risk assessment as a service. And that is where we step in as Rabobank. And when the ecosystem is in play, the movement can start to reduce the risk around lending to smallholder farmers. And this is how we, as Rabobank, help smallholder farmers around the world. This is how we grow a better world together. This is how I bring a smile on the smallholder's face. If you're eager to make a difference, and if you're interested and passionate about data science, doing good, and food and agri, let me know. We're always looking for new and bright minds. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Robbie de Jong. I hear a small echo, but I am sure it will be solved soon. Let's open the chat to see if there are any comments or if there are any remarks from you, our dear viewers. I would like to ask the first question, and that would be something about the weather and the climate data. I saw in the schedule you had wind and humidity and other elements. And I was wondering, those, I assume, are data from the past, because that's the only data you currently have. But given the climate change, how do you incorporate this in your models?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's where it becomes very important that you have those experts closely involved, because those experts can tell you how it is, will be changing in the future. Mm-hmm. And then you will add that via business rules to your model.
Okay, so the system allows for some predictive elements to compensate for that.
Yeah.
Okay. My other question is, you said, I'm very impressed by the wide range of data that you collect. I also would think personally, like, that is a lot of work to do for perhaps a small credit. Mm-hmm. Did you also calculate, did you gather some data on what would be the loss and the gain from if you do this method and if you don't do this method? What would be the ratio of smallholder farmers being able to pay back their credits or not?
Yeah, I think the question consists of two parts. So yes. The first one is, if you look at the data, you should decide how much does it cost to collect that data.
Yeah.
And do those benefits of using that data is worth paying that amount of money. So that's per data type, something you need to find out. So that costs time as well as money. On the other hand, it's also very important to explain internally to your manager or to someone who is your stakeholder, to tell them that in the first maybe years, your business model will be negative. So in the beginning, you're investing to make the predictability of your model as good as possible. And that's cost a lot of investment of money to get the data, to find the right partners to form an ecosystem with, and to have the resources. So that is also a part where you should closely align with your stakeholder management in order that they don't pull out the funding at the moment when you think you're finally there.
Okay. And maybe a final question, because I don't see any questions in the chat so far, but perhaps people will talk to you afterwards in the virtual market in the next round. Final question is, what types of colleagues do you have if you want to do all this work? And do they also spend time in the regions where they give out the credits, or is it on a distance?
Yeah, we have actually what you say, you need to have a multidisciplinary team. We have that, because in order to build the end-to-end solution, you need to have the visual designer, you need to have a front-end developer, and you need a designer who designs the whole solution and the dashboard. So we call that a UX designer. So that's only to make the front end. Then you have the data scientist and the data engineer and the software engineer to make the API and the model in order to make that successful. And then you need to work closely together with the people who build the platform, where because you need to surface this solution via the dashboard to value chain actors. So you need to have someone in your team that has close relationship with the buyers, to say it so. Also, you have someone that looks at the whole business model. So that's a role that we have. And then we have the experts in the Netherlands, as in the countries we're working closely with. And those people that are, unfortunately due to COVID, we were not allowed to travel. But then there are people there that conducted the interviews with the small, the farmer, as well as with our end users. For us, the target customer as well, and to learn how they would like to use the solution and where they're struggling with, to really get a better understanding about the problem.
Okay, thank you, Roby. One more question from the viewers is if there's any other applications from data science at the Rabobank, can you give us one or two more examples to get a taste of this?
Yeah, that's good. So we have internally, which is really very important. One is that we have an engine that classifies the transaction engine. So it says, for example, where you have spent your money on. And that is a very important, we call it a building block, so reusable component that is used within a lot of solutions within the bank. So for example, if you look at your mobile app, that algorithm is used to say what you have used, where you spent your money on periodically. So maybe on Netflix, for example. So that are solutions where we are working on, as well as what you see, for example, within audit. They're also having solutions to determine all the anomalies. So to look up, for example, fraud examples or people that try to, how do you say that? Do some money laundering, for example. So within the bank, and I was surprised when I started within Rabobank, there are lots of different type of analytics solutions that can be built.
Okay, that's good to get the full scope, so to say. And if you want to know more, if you want to know more about this, then you can talk to Roby de Jong afterwards. Yep. Thanks very much once again for your presentation and a very in-depth and compact story of something that is transforming lives.